Relations between Turkey and Israel have deteriorated significantly due to Israel's military actions in Gaza. Tensions have escalated to the point that Turkey has completely banned trade with Israel from May 2024 onwards. It was expected that there would be tensions between Israel and Turkey due to the Gaza war, because we are aware of Turkey's aspirations to become the leader of the Islamic world and to increase its influence in the Muslim world. So, regarding the Palestine issue, it was obvious that Turkey would criticize Israel's crackdown in Gaza, which would lead to strained bilateral relations between the two countries. That was totally expected. However, tensions would rise so much that trade between the two countries would shut down completely. That was unexpected. Many other countries have also criticized Israel's military crackdown in Gaza, but Turkey has gone one step further and suspended trade altogether. This is quite a stringent action. This is due to the tremendous domestic pressure on Turkey's President Erdogan. Media coverage of the war is increasing negative sentiment towards Israel among the Turkish public. For political mileage, opposition parties are putting pressure on the ruling government to take a hard stance against Israel. High pressure is building up on Erdogan due to growing pro-Palestine sentiment in the country. People want the government to cut off ties with Israel and take decisive actions against it. That is why we see Erdogan making such statements in which he criticizes Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu, accuses Israel of violating international law, and holds it responsible for human rights violations in Gaza. Obviously, such statements have greatly strained the bilateral relationship between Turkey and Israel, to the point that it has now resulted in a trade embargo. But don't think that Turkey has all of a sudden started exerting economic pressure on Israel. Turkey has been frequently criticizing Israel on the Palestine issue for a long time. Also, Turkey's support for Hamas is well known, whereas Israel and many Western countries consider Hamas a terrorist organization. Due to these differences, diplomatic relations between the two countries have become quite strained, and the effect of these tensions is now being seen on economic ties as well. Earlier, Turkey imposed export restrictions on Israeli products. Look at this data from the Turkish Statistical Institute and you will get an idea. In 2023, there was trade worth $7 billion between Turkey and Israel. And what do these figures tell us? The figures till just before the trade ban in May 2024 show that trade dropped from $7 billion to $2.1 billion. That is a massive reduction of almost $5 billion. And now, from May 2024 onwards, Turkey has completely banned trade until Israel stops attacking Gaza and provides humanitarian aid. And we know that as long as Netanyahu is in power, that doesn't seem to happen anytime soon. So expect these tensions to continue for a while. Before the war, both countries were considering increasing energy and trade cooperation. But on October 7, 2023, everything changed. Hamas launched a massive attack on Israel from the Gaza Strip. In response, Israel invaded Gaza. Netanyahu vowed to wipe out Hamas, which started a dangerous war in West Asia that is still ongoing. So far, more than 40,000 people have lost their lives in this brutal war, of which around 97% are Palestinians. Turkey has severely criticized Israel for this. Geopolitical tensions have greatly increased. Relations between Israel and Turkey have deteriorated, and talks of economic cooperation before the war have been relegated to the back seat. Both countries will have to bear economic costs due to the trade being cut off. Let us talk about Turkey first. Turkey enjoyed a trade surplus in its trade with Israel, meaning Turkey was exporting more to Israel and importing less from Israel. What will happen now after the trade is banned? Turkey will lose a significant market for its exports. This means that the local businesses involved in the production and distribution of the goods that used to be exported from Turkey will be affected. The reduction in exports will impact Turkey's trade balance. Look, if the exports of a country are high, it naturally means that the demand for its goods and services is high. Because when there is demand, then there will be production and export, right? And when production shoots up, jobs are created and the economy grows. Everyone wants to invest in a healthy and stable economy. So in such a case, foreign investments come. The economy becomes resilient and there is innovation in the country to produce better products to export. The negotiating power of the nation to make favorable trade agreements increases, which in turn further boosts exports. That brings in foreign exchange reserves into the country, which provides a cushion against economic shocks. So do you see how export growth creates a virtuous cycle in the economy? That is why countries want to boost their exports. However, by suspending trade with Israel due to domestic pressure, Turkey itself has destroyed a significant export market. Moreover, a free trade agreement exists between Israel and Turkey gained more benefit from it. Remember, Turkey enjoyed a trade surplus? So now, after the trade ban, Turkey will have to find an alternative market for its exports. That was about Turkey. Now let us see the case of Israel. Turkish goods will not come to Israel due to the trade ban. Turkey supplied staple food items, machinery, raw materials, construction materials, etc. to Israel. Now, if the supply of these items suddenly stops, there will be a shortage in Israel. Supply has reduced, so prices will go up. Let us say if Turkish goods, instead of coming directly, enter Israel through a third country, prices will increase in this rerouting too. Look at the map. Turkey is very close to Israel. Therefore, it used to be a very convenient source for Israel. The distance from Turkey's Mersin port to Tel Aviv is only around 600 kilometers. From here, the trade used to be quite convenient. But now, the trade suspension will disrupt supply chains. Israel will be forced to look for alternative sources. In the short term, Israel will face shortages of items, higher prices, and supply chain challenges. Certainly, Israel can manage these challenges in the long term by boosting domestic manufacturing and diversifying import sources. But all this will take time. It won't happen overnight. And we are talking about now. Israel is in the middle of a war right now. And at this time, it would absolutely not want any additional pressure on the economy. Shortages created by market restrictions and increased prices will raise the cost of living for Israeli citizens, putting pressure on the Israeli government. It will be quite challenging for Netanyahu to manage all this. On one hand, he wants to protect national honor, and on the other hand, he has to manage public interests as well. And in the worst case scenario, if other countries also join the economic boycott of Israel, following Turkey's example, it would be extremely difficult for Israel. Currently, Israel is forced not only to find alternative sources for its imports, but also to find alternative destinations for its exports. Israel used to export around $1.5 billion worth of goods to Turkey. After the trade ban, it will have to find alternative countries that are willing to take these goods. To fill the gap left by the absence of Turkish goods, Israel will now have to seek the support of countries like Greece and Italy. Additionally, it will have to look for alternative destinations that can accept the Israeli goods that were meant to be sent to Turkey. Turkey will also have to explore such alternatives. Israel has learned a hard lesson about identifying countries with which supply chains can suddenly be disrupted due to a fluid situation, countries with which commercial ties can deteriorate rapidly in times of volatility. Israel will need to reduce its reliance on such countries and make its trade environment more resilient. Right now, Israel cannot even retaliate against Turkey's hostile policies, even if it wants to. Even if Israel were to challenge Turkey's economic boycott in the World Trade Organization, it wouldn't work. Because WTO rules permit import bans imposed for wartime actions. In normal times, if Turkey had done this, it would be considered a violation of WTO rules. In that case, additional sanctions would likely be imposed on Turkey. Other countries would stop importing from Turkey. economic pressure would build up, and Turkey would eventually have to lift the import ban, as the main goal of the WTO is to promote free and fair trade among its members. And both Turkey and Israel are members of the WTO. So Turkey's hostile actions would have had severe repercussions in peacetime. But currently, the situation is different. Turkey has imposed a trade ban due to Israel's wartime actions. WTO rules provide an exception that allows a country to take necessary steps to protect its security interests during a war or any emergency situation. Although there is significant pressure on Israel to retaliate and build up economic pressure on Turkey, such as by abrogating the free trade agreement, it is not easy to do so, because Turkey is not at war. Therefore, if Israel retaliates, it could be considered a violation of WTO rules. So at this time, Israel cannot do much against Turkey. This episode teaches us how geopolitical tensions can suddenly spoil years of economic relationships, how nations can start weaponizing trade to exert pressure on their rivals. To meet their strategic objectives, tactics such as trade restrictions, sanctions, tariff hikes, supply chain manipulation, and currency manipulation are used, which results in realignments in regional trade patterns. So what's next? See, if the war ends or the conflict de-escalates, then that's good. Otherwise, we'll have to wait a bit for normalcy. As long as Erdogan remains in power, Turkey's ties with Israel will remain strained. Erdogan's term will end in 2028. After that, if Turkey has a leader who does not harbor a lot of hatred for Israel, then there might be a possibility of an improvement in relations. Maybe then, trade relations between Israel and Turkey could be restored. Until that happens, both countries will seek ways to reduce their economic dependence on each other. They'll explore alternative trade partnerships and try to achieve self-sufficiency to mitigate the economic ramifications of the trade ban. This is the end of the session. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for your time.